In a quiet neighborhood filled with old, small apartment buildings, the Rodriguezes lived on the third floor of a faded brick complex. The streets were lined with tall trees that whispered softly in the breeze, and the sounds of children playing mixed with distant cars and the occasional bark of a dog. It was a place where neighbors knew each other by name, and most days passed quietly. The Rodriguez family was well known in the building. Maria and Carlos worked long hours to support their three children, Sofia, Mateo, and little Elena. They were hardworking, kind, and close-knit. Their laughter could often be heard echoing through the halls during family dinners or weekend celebrations. They loved music, dancing, and sharing stories. But they were never troublemakers. No one ever had a reason to complain about them before. Above them lived Mr. Thompson, the landlord. He was an older man with gray hair that had thinned over the years and a face that rarely smiled. Mr. Thompson was strict and no-nonsense. He cared deeply about rules and quietness. Managing several apartments was a heavy responsibility, and he often seemed tired and alone, spending his days checking up on his properties and dealing with complaints from tenants. Over the past few months, some neighbors had started whispering. A few complained about noise, loud music, or the Rodriguez's family gatherings that sometimes went late into the night. Nothing extreme, but enough to make Mr. Thompson uneasy. He worried that if things didn't change, other tenants might leave. Deep down, he didn't want trouble, but the small noise complaints started to weigh on him. The tension in the building was growing, though no one knew how far it would go. One chilly morning, Maria opened the mailbox and pulled out a crisp, official-looking envelope. Her heart sank as she saw the bold letters on the paper inside. Eviction notice. The letter accused the Rodriguezes of being too loud and demanded they leave the apartment within 30 days. Maria's hands trembled as she read the words again, hoping she had misunderstood something. But no, it was clear and final. The family gathered in their small living room, the notice laying heavily between them on the worn coffee table. Carlos rubbed his forehead, trying to stay calm, but his eyes betrayed his worry. Sofia and Mateo looked at their parents, confusion and fear clouding their young faces. Little Elena clung silently to her mother's side, sensing something was wrong but not understanding why. No warnings, no chance to fix anything. Maria's voice cracked. How could this happen without a single talk or a letter before now? Carlos shook his head. It feels like a shock, like we're being punished without a reason. The Rodriguezes had always done their best to keep the noise down after the few complaints they had heard, but they never thought it would lead to eviction. They felt helpless. Their home wasn't just a place to live, it was where they built their life, where the children laughed, learned, and dreamed. Now it felt like everything was slipping away. Determined, Carlos went to see Mr. Thompson that same day. He found the landlord sitting at his small desk in the building office, looking tired but firm. "Mr. Thompson, please, we want to talk. We didn't know we were disturbing anyone so badly." "We can fix it," Carlos said, trying to keep his voice steady. Mr. Thompson's eyes didn't soften. "I'm sorry, Carlos, I've already made up my mind. The other tenants are complaining, and I have to keep the building peaceful. It's not personal." The coldness in his voice hit Carlos like a blow. No room for discussion. No understanding, just a final decision. Back home, the family's worries deepened. Sofia, usually full of energy and smiles, sat quietly, tears brimming in her eyes. Mateo, trying to be brave, whispered to his sister, "Maybe we can find another place soon." But Maria and Carlos knew how hard it was to find a new home, especially with their tight budget. The thought of leaving the neighborhood, the school, and the friends their children loved was unbearable. News of the eviction spread quietly among the neighbors. Some shook their heads sadly, feeling sympathy for the Rodriguezes. Mrs. Lopez, who lived across the hall, whispered, "They're a good family. This isn't right." But others were less kind. "They've been loud too often," grumbled Mr. Evans from downstairs. "Someone has to keep order." The Rodriguezes felt themselves growing more isolated. Friends avoided the topic, neighbors kept their distance, and the building that once felt like home now felt cold and unwelcoming. Every day was a battle against fear and uncertainty. With no clear way out and their future hanging by a thread, the Rodriguezes knew they had to fight back. But they had no idea just how far this fight would go, or who would come to their rescue. Desperate and feeling trapped, Maria reached out to a local community center for advice. There, she was given the name of a lawyer known for standing up for families facing unfair evictions. Nervously, the Rodriguezes made the call. A few days later, they met Mrs. Elena Martinez. She was a confident woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a firm voice that carried the strength of someone who had fought many battles and won. Mrs. Martinez listened carefully as the Rodriguezes explained their story, the sudden eviction and the cold refusal from Mr. Thompson. "This isn't just about noise," Mrs. Martinez said quietly, "it's about your rights. Landlords must follow a process. They have to warn tenants first, give them a chance to fix the problem, and must not act unfairly." Maria felt a small spark of hope. For the first time in weeks, someone was on their side. Mrs. Martinez promised to help, and soon she sent a letter to Mr. Thompson, informing him that she was representing the Rodriguezes. When the landlord received the letter, his reaction was unexpected. The cold confidence he showed before seemed to vanish. Suddenly he was nervous and defensive. A neighbor who worked as a janitor mentioned how Mr. Thompson paced his office late into the night after reading the letter. He even called the building manager several times, trying to find a way out of the fight. When Mr. Thompson finally met with Mrs. Martinez, his tone was different. He tried to downplay the noise complaints and suggested maybe the eviction could be reconsidered. But Mrs. Martinez was firm. She explained clearly that without proper warnings and a chance to improve, the eviction notice was illegal. She reminded him, every tenant has a right to peaceful living and fair treatment under the law. You can't just decide to kick them out because it's easier or more profitable. As the fight continued, the Rodriguezes learned more about Mrs. Martinez's connection to their family. Years ago she had helped Carlos' sister with a similar eviction case in the same neighborhood. Though they hadn't met before, Mrs. Martinez felt a personal mission to protect families like the Rodriguezes from losing their homes unjustly. Sophia listened closely as her mother told her about Mrs. Martinez. "She's like a shield, protecting us," she whispered. For the first time since the eviction notice arrived, hope returned to their small apartment. The tension that once filled their home began to ease. They were no longer alone. Mrs. Martinez's calm confidence gave them strength, and they held onto the promise that their voices would be heard. The battle wasn't over, but with Mrs. Martinez on their side, the Rodriguezes felt ready to face whatever came next. The day of the court hearing arrived with a heavy cloud hanging over the neighborhood. The small courtroom was packed, neighbors curious, some supportive, others skeptical. The Rodriguezes sat together, holding hands tightly, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and hope. Mrs. Martinez stood beside them, calm and prepared. Mr. Thompson appeared confident at first. He told the judge that the Rodriguezes had been too loud and disturbed other tenants. "I only want to keep peace in my building," he said, his voice steady but with a slight edge. But Mrs. Martinez was ready. She began by presenting the eviction notice and pointing out the missing warnings. Then, she called neighbors who testified that the Rodriguezes had been careful after the first complaints, often lowering their voices and ending gatherings early. Then came the turning point. Mrs. Martinez revealed documents showing that Mr. Thompson had recently been negotiating to rent the apartment to a new tenant willing to pay much more money. "This eviction isn't about noise," she said quietly but firmly. "It's about money and discrimination." The courtroom grew still. Mr. Thompson's face changed, the stern landlord's mask slipped, revealing a man stressed and pressured, struggling to hide his true reasons. The judge noticed too. Mrs. Martinez turned to the Rodriguezes. "Your home isn't just a place to live, it's where your family grows, laughs and dreams. And you have a right to that home without fear." Carlos stood and spoke, his voice strong despite the nerves. "This place is everything to us. Our children go to school here. We have neighbors who care. To lose this home would break us." Maria added, her eyes shining with tears. "We are not a problem. We are a family trying to live and love." The judge listened carefully, moved by their words and the evidence. After a tense pause, the judge ruled in favor of the Rodriguezes. The eviction was cancelled and Mr. Thompson was ordered to stop all attempts to remove the family unfairly. In the days that followed, Mr. Thompson surprised many by apologizing publicly. "I was wrong to treat the Rodriguezes like that," he admitted during a community meeting. "I let fear and money cloud my judgment. I promise to be fair moving forward." The Rodriguezes felt a weight lift from their shoulders. Their home was safe, and the fight had brought them closer as a family and community. They had faced fear and injustice, but found strength in each other and in the power of standing up for what was right. After the court's decision, the Rodriguezes returned to their home with a mix of relief and caution. The victory felt like a heavy stone lifted from their chests, but the memory of the fight still lingered. They knew that trust wouldn't come overnight, and the shadow of eviction would take time to fade. Mr. Thompson, to everyone's surprise, made small efforts to mend fences. He greeted them more kindly in the hallways and even stopped by to say a quiet apology. Yet, beneath the surface, he remained a man shaped by his fears and worries, a landlord still learning how to balance rules with compassion. The family accepted his apology but kept a watchful eye, knowing change is a slow process. In their little apartment, the Rodriguezes felt stronger than before. The battles had drawn them closer, their bond deepened by shared struggles and unwavering love. They learned that standing up for their rights was not just about fighting the landlord, it was about protecting their dignity and the future of their children. Maria often said to her family, "We didn't just save our home, we found our voice." Sophia, Mateo, and Elena began to understand the power of loyalty and support. They saw how courage, even in the face of fear, could change their lives. The story of the Rodriguezes reminds us all that justice sometimes arrives when least expected. It shows how those who seem powerless can find strength in family, community, and the right allies. And above all, it teaches that no one should have to fight alone to keep the place they call home.